Annie, who works as a lawyer. She's recently married a guy named Peter. It's actually the second marriage for both of them. They've got this blended family situation going on. Annie has 2 daughters from her previous marriage, and Peter has a teenage son named Gustav. Now, Peter absolutely adores his son Gustav, but Annie's got different ideas. She thinks it would be better if Gustav went to boarding school, kind of wanting to keep him at a distance. When Gustav first comes to stay with them, Annie's daughters try to be nice and give him a welcome gift, just a simple keychain. But Gustav? He barely cracks a smile. You can tell right away something's not quite right. Annie ends up talking to her sister about the whole situation, and her sister straight up says she hopes Gustav won't stick around too long. Things start getting messy pretty quickly. One day, Annie comes home and finds that keychain her daughters gave Gustav just thrown outside the house. Inside, she walks into this heated argument between Gustav and his dad. It's pretty clear their relationship is pretty rocky. That evening, Peter's feeling pretty down about the whole thing. He tells Annie he thinks he messed up by bringing Gustav to live with them. Annie tries to be supportive, telling him to hang in there and that things will get better with time. But then things get even more complicated. Annie comes home one day to find out some of her valuable stuff has gone missing. She calls Peter right away to let him know. Later, while she's doing laundry, of all things, she finds her missing stuff hidden in Gustav's clothes. Busted. When she confronts Gustav about it, he tries to play innocent at first, but when Annie threatens to get the police involved, he finally owns up to it. Instead of going to the cops, Annie makes a deal with him. She'll keep quiet if he starts behaving better and being nicer to everyone in the house. For a while, things actually seem to improve. Gustav starts acting more friendly, and both Annie and Peter are relieved to see the change. Then Gustav brings home his girlfriend Amanda one day. Everything seems normal at first. They hang out in his room, doing typical teenage couple stuff. But something weird happens. Annie starts feeling bothered by hearing them together, and she can't sleep that night. The family tries to do normal things, like going on a picnic together. But there's this weird tension building. One day, while Peter's busy chatting with relatives, Annie gets bored and starts dancing to some music. When Peter ignores her, she goes off by herself, but then Gustav shows up and suggests they go somewhere together. They end up at this club, just hanging out and drinking, until Gustav gets a text from Amanda and has to leave. That's when things start getting really complicated. Annie kisses him, which obviously makes Gustav feel super uncomfortable, and he gets out of there fast. When Annie gets home late that night, Peter's pretty upset that she didn't even take her phone with her. But things are about to get way more messed up. Annie can't stop thinking about Gustav, and one night, she actually goes to his room and starts flirting with him. Even though Gustav tries to resist at first, they end up having an affair. Annie just leaves afterward without saying anything. The next day, trying to act normal, or maybe feeling guilty, Annie buys Gustav a laptop. Peter gets mad about this, saying Gustav is his kid and he should be the one buying him stuff. Annie tries to smooth things over by saying Gustav is their son now, so it doesn't matter who buys him things. Peter actually buys this explanation and feels better about it. But here's where it gets really twisted. Annie starts living this double life. She's having an affair with Gustav during the day when Peter's not around, and then acting like a normal wife with Peter at night. Gustav starts asking her personal questions and writing down her answers, which seems kind of strange. Things start falling apart at the birthday party. Gustav keeps getting closer to Annie, and at one point, he starts kissing her neck right where Annie's sister can see them. Annie freaks out, worried that her sister will spill their secret. When her sister leaves the party early, Annie knows something's wrong. She gets angry at Gustav, which upsets him so much that he pulls this crazy stunt, climbing up a nearby tree and jumping down. When Peter runs over to check on Gustav, the kid pretends he can't move his legs. Peter's totally panicked until Gustav starts laughing, showing it was all just a joke. But Peter's not amused. He's furious about Gustav messing around like that. Later that night, Peter and Annie have a serious talk about Gustav. Peter's worried that Gustav still hasn't accepted their new family setup. The next day, Annie tries to end things with Gustav, telling him to forget everything that happened between them and keep quiet about it. Then things get really tense. Peter tells Annie that he and Gustav are going away for a few days to spend some father-son time together. But he also mentions that his sister called, which makes Annie super nervous. She's terrified that her sister might have told Peter what she saw at the party. Annie's own kid asks to go with Dad, but Annie says no. After Peter and Gustav leave, Annie gets even more worried. She tries to talk to her sister the next day, but her sister won't even speak to her. Peter and Gustav show up back home way earlier than planned. They were supposed to be gone for a week. Annie can barely look Peter in the eye, especially when he drops he's planning to send Gustav to boarding school because Gustav told him everything. Annie goes into full panic mode but plays it cool. She denies everything and tries to make Peter think Gustav's lying. She even brings up the theft incident from before to make herself look more trustworthy. In a really sneaky move, she finds and breaks the tape recorder where Gustav had recorded their conversations. The next day, Peter tries to tell Gustav that it's wrong to make up lies about people. But Gustav keeps insisting he's telling the truth. When he tries to talk to Annie about it, she completely ignores him. Things get ugly when Gustav sees Annie again. He actually spits in her face. Annie tells him he can't stay with them anymore after that. Gustav ends up agreeing to go to boarding school, which makes Annie's daughter really sad. She'd gotten used to having him around. Peter drives Gustav to the school, and you can tell it's breaking his heart to leave his son there. But Gustav's not done yet. He shows up at Annie's office one day, threatening to tell Peter everything. Annie, being a lawyer, basically threatens him right back, saying he can go to the police if he wants, but it'll only cause problems for him. She tries to make a deal. If Gustav tells Peter he made everything up, he can come back home. But Gustav's had enough of Annie's games. He knows she's been manipulating everyone, and he wants his dad to know the truth about her relationships with other men. Things take a dark turn when Gustav sneaks into Peter's house one last time. Annie catches him there, but she still won't listen to anything he has to say. After Gustav leaves, the school calls Peter to report Gustav missing. A few days later, the police get involved. Peter goes to the police station alone, refusing Annie's offer to come with him. When Peter comes back home, he's completely broken. He tells Annie they found Gustav's body frozen in the snow. Annie breaks down crying, knowing deep down that she's responsible for pushing Gustav to this point. Peter blames himself at first, thinking he shouldn't have sent Gustav to boarding school. But then the truth starts coming out. Peter finally realizes that Gustav was telling the truth all along, and he loses it with Annie. The movie ends with the whole family at Gustav's funeral, leaving everyone to deal with the horrible consequences of their actions.